Hello and welcome to Hammer Time, a Hammer horror podcast, part of the Evolution of Horror Network. I'm Becky Darke, a film critic and new Hammer devotee, and I'm joined by my co-host, human encyclopedia of film and TV and Hammer superfan, Kevin Lyons. Hi, Kev.
Hi, Becky. How are you?
All right, you know.
We're looking forward to this, aren't we?
Yeah, it's going to be really fun.
You may notice a certain lack of energy in this episode. We will try to do our best to be upbeat and positive, but oh my God.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God, yes.
In this podcast, Kevin and I are watching and discussing every horror film in Hammer's back catalogue. And this week, we are back in Egypt with The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb from 1964.
Beware, you infidels and unbelievers. Take heed of the curse. Do not meddle with the secrets of the dead.
Our Hammer Time discussions are all spoilerific, and we go into plot details and chat about the endings of the films. So if you would like to watch Curse of the Mummy's Tomb before you listen to this episode, you can buy or rent it on VOD. It's just available out there. Oh, Kev, right. 5 years on from The Mummy, Hammer returns to Egypt. Archeologists reanimated pharaohs and questionable casting decisions.
Very questionable.
Was this a film the audiences were kind of clamouring for? Like, why and how did they resurrect, for want of a better word, the Mummy films now?
There are a lot of hows and whys with this film. Why? Why? As we go through, you just keep asking yourself, why? But, well, the Mummy, the original Mummy, had been a hit.
Yeah.
And on that note, a friend of mine, a friend of the pod, Glyn, hi Glyn, has been saying for ages that he noted that you weren't that keen on the Mummy.
I wasn't.
And he kept saying, wait till she gets to the Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. And it's like, so we know, we've been expecting this for some while. But despite Becky not being convinced, the Mummy was a hit. And I'm not entirely sure that the public were really desperate for another trip back to Egypt. The Mummy's not it's a very limited monster, isn't it? You can't do a lot with it. It's never been as sexy as a vampire, not unless you've got some weird fetish about dug-up Egyptian kings and queens. I don't know, maybe you have. Not for me to judge. It's never been as tragic as a werewolf or Frankenstein's monster.
No.
And it's not as useful a tool for, like, social commentary as a zombie.
No.
It's just sort of there, isn't it? It's a very limited monster.
Yeah.
There are very few Mummy films, apart from that 1959 Hammer film, that I would go back to with any kind of enthusiasm. I just find them quite a dull monster. So I'm not entirely sure why Hammer thought after 5 years and some magnificent films in between, this was the way to go. The only thing I can think of is it all comes down to, and I'm sorry I'm going to pick on him again, director, producer, writer Michael Carreras. Now, I will say this again, because I said this in Maniac, and I want this to be absolutely clear. I really, really admire Michael Carreras as a producer. He's going to do some incredibly interesting things when he takes over the running of Hammer in 1971.
Yeah.
He's going to do some experiments in the genre. They don't always work, but they're always interesting. He's always trying to do something new.
Yeah.
As a director, he leaves a lot to be desired.
Yeah.
But it turns out, we know that he didn't like horror films very much, but he did have a soft spot for The Mummy. And so I wonder if that explains why he did this. I think he left Hammer in 1961 to set up his own production company, Capricorn. And he, at the time that he left, he wasn't really very happy with the way Hammer had been going. He just didn't like it at all. And he'd said, in fact, I got fed up with the formula. I thought, I can't go on doing these things with the same bloody people all the time. Which I think sums up his attitude where he was at the time in the early to mid-60s. And it's against that backdrop that he decides to resurrect the Mummy.
Right.
And I don't think
That's
it was
really
the best way to do it. Yeah. Also very interesting is another producer at Hammer, Anthony Hines, claimed that this was Hammer's 50th feature film.
Okay.
Which I think is true if you start counting from the Quatermass experiments, as we did. But completely wrong if you take in all the films they made before that. So even at this early stage, I think Hammer was sort of saying, We are the House of Hammer.
Interesting.
This is what we do. All those great crime thrillers that they made for, years and decades beforehand were suddenly being written out of the official history.
But that's weird, isn't it? Because that means that... Because we're not at 50. We're not,
no. Because
he's counting the other genres of films that they made post-Quatermass, but not the ones that he made before.
Exactly. So, things like, Spaceways don't count, and Four-Sided Triangle doesn't count, and, sort of Stolen Face doesn't count. All these films sort of eventually build up to The Curse of Frankenstein. But, that was the publicity thing at the time. You may read that if you're sort of getting into Hammer and going and reading, various bits and pieces about it. Don't believe it. We are way past 50. In fact, I think they'd made about 50, but I'm sure I said the Quatermass Experiment was film number 54 or something.
Yeah, it was something like that.
Yeah, so they'd made at least 50 films before the Quatermass Experiment. So just, take that with a pinch of salt.
He could have just said 100.
He could have said 100 and no one would have noticed. It would have been fine. And I tell you these facts mainly because it's probably the most interesting thing you're going to hear for the next hour or so. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but yeah, it's kind of downhill from here. Over to you, Becky.
Hello. Okay, let's do the plot of the movie. Shamelessly stolen from Letterboxd. Those who have interfered with the tomb of Ra-Antef are in terrible danger. Against expert advice, American showman and financial backer of an expedition, Alexander King, plans a world tour exhibiting his magnificent discovery from the ancient world. But on opening night, the sarcophagus is void of its contents. The mummy has escaped to fulfill the dreadful prophecy and exact a violent and bloody revenge on all those who defiled his final resting place.
Well, fair play, Letterboxd. You've made that sound a lot more interesting than it actually is. Well done.
Well, yeah, but also, apart from the American showman and financial backer part, that's basically the plot of the first Mummy.
It is, and herein is one of the many, many problems I have with this film, that there's nothing here that's particularly new.
No.
One little wrinkle we'll talk about in a little while, but yeah, no. It's, it doesn't bring much new to the table.
It really doesn't. All right, so let's not beat about the bush. Neither of us are a huge fan. I think that both of us think that this is the worst one we'll have talked about yet.
I was looking at my review of it last night after I rewatched the film, and I thought, surely when I did all my month-long series of Hammer film reviews, I would have put the boot into this film. I was surprised how kind I was to it, because having watched it last night, I really struggled with this. I really found this so difficult to get through it. And I'm afraid we have to lay the blame very firmly at the feet of poor old Michael Carreras.
Yeah.
And, he's quite a stodgy director, I think. He doesn't have that grasp of tension and suspense that seems to come very naturally to Terence Fisher. Mm-hmm. And in fact made painfully obvious by the fact that Mummy's Tomb was released on a double bill with Fisher's way better The Gorgon.
Yeah.
Can you imagine these two films playing back to... Well, I don't have to imagine. I watched it last night back to back, and it's... Oh, dear God. And he doesn't have the photographer's eye that Freddie Fisher had.
No.
Freddie Fisher couldn't really do the Gothic. He didn't really sort of come to grips with it, but he had that beautiful photographer's eye. Well, I find Michael Carreras' films that he directs a bit bland. He seemed to be a lot happier, I think, not doing horror films, but doing things like She, 1 Million Years BC, things like that.
Okay.
With kind of action films and adventure films, stuff like that. That seemed to be his speciality. I think when he took over the company in 1971, I think he was pragmatic enough to realise that Hammer was horror.
Yeah.
Even still then, the times had changed, but even then, Hammer was horror. And so he was pragmatic enough to sort of embrace the horror film in a slightly different way. But at this point, I think he was just bored to death of doing horror films, and just... You can tell that by watching this film.
So, in that case, why did he direct it? Why didn't they get someone else to do it?
It's a good question. I don't know. He was producing it. He wrote it as well under the name Henry Younger? I think he uses the name, which is a play on John Elder, which was Anthony Hines' pseudonym for writing.
Right.
I mean, that's as funny as this gets. Honestly, it really is. But But and I just wonder if it's one of those cases of there's no one around him to say, no, stop. He'd left Hammer, he was freelancing, but he was the son of the managing director of Hammer, James Carreras.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if, people will just say, I'll just let him get on with it and make a film. I can't see why he would have wanted to do this at all. His heart clearly isn't in it when you watch the film. There's no fire under this film at all.
Well, and I think one of the... Obviously, this is it's just a theory, but from watching it, there's no fire under any of the performances either.
No.
And it feels very much like if that was the energy that Michael Carreras was bringing to set and bringing to his kind of direction of the film and the actors, maybe some of it rubbed off because the chemistry is lacking. I mean, my God, there's supposed to be romantic sparks between the character Annette and two of the guys, Adam and John. And Kev, I rarely cringe away from like scenes that are supposed to be passionate than I did in this film. There are some of the worst on-screen kisses I have ever seen. There is no chemistry. There's no energy between any of the characters, it seems. I would say the one real standout for me is Fred Clark as Alexander King, who is the American financier and businessman from the synopsis. And at least he breathes a bit of energy in. I mean, he's completely odious to spend any time with. But at least he's committing to that, But everybody else just seems... bored?
They do. They seem really bored with each other's company, which does not bode well for us having to sit with them for 80 minutes.
No.
One of the good things we can say about the film, it is only 80 minutes long. And when you're saying that, you're in trouble. I think part of the problem here is, people say, I want to be a film director. I know a lot of people who want that. They say their ambition to be a film director. I think they don't understand what a film director actually does. I think they just turn up on the set and say, point the camera over there and shoot until I say stop.
Yeah.
And they don't. It's all about storytelling. It's about being able to move the story along. It's about creating an atmosphere, bringing out the best in the actors.
Yeah.
Giving them the room, but also the input that they need to be able to bring the characters to life. I don't think Carreras was able to do any of that.
No.
I hate saying this about Michael Carreras because, like I say, I do admire the guy. And I promise Michael Carreras fans I'm going to sing his praises very loudly from 1971 onwards, I promise. But for the moment, I don't think he kind of knew how to direct a film, really. I think he had that ambition. I can make a film, then it turns up doing this. And there's just no energy in it. There's no sense of storytelling. It plods from one scene to the next.
It plods.
Yeah, there's no sense of like a sort of a line running through it where it sort of builds up and builds up and builds up. It just sort of starts and then it stops. And stuff happens in between.
Which is even more frustrating as an audience member. When essentially it's repeating what's been done before.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm not a big fan of The Mummy, but I know a lot of people are, including you. And it's frustrating to see a film that hits so many of the same story beats, but is doing it less competently and in a more plodding way. It's almost like, Carreras, you had the blueprint if you wanted to use that and kind of build on it with this almost like a sort of King Kong conceit that you've sort of layered over the top of it, then you could have used more from what sort of went before and learned more from that. But he's almost taken that, stripped all of the energy out of it. Yeah. And that, as I say, as you're watching it, it's like, well, even as somebody who didn't love the first film, I'm sort of thinking, well, I've seen this before better. And what has been added and what does feel different, even then, I've just name dropped King Kong. Like it again, it doesn't feel like it's anything particularly new. It just seems like another story device that has been sort of lifted from something else and slightly shoehorned in. And then it just becomes a guy in dirty bandages smashing through pane glass windows
Exactly.
and strangling people. And, you know, it's just... I don't know, what are we doing?
What are we doing here? I know there's a bit of me, and I know this isn't true. I know this isn't what happened, but, you know, so don't jump on me, guys. Honestly, I know this isn't the fact. But there's a bit of me that keeps thinking, did Carreras dislike horror films so much that he deliberately made a bad one to show everybody how rubbish horror films were? Because I can't think of any other reason why he would have directed a film this boring.
It's so lacklustre.
It's so lacklustre. It's just dull. The only crime any film can commit, in my eyes, is to be dull.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen some rubbish films that I absolutely love. You know, I would go back to the abysmal Zombies Lake tomorrow, or tonight even, because it amuses me and entertains me. But I've seen, you know, I've never got through Ryan's Daughter, for example, which is supposed to be a great classic film, because I find it boring, and I've never got through it. It's the only crime a film can commit, and this film bores me.
Yeah.
It really bores me.
And even in the script, you know, moments feel like they are being parroted almost from the first film. Stuff about blatant sacrilege and, you know, the mummy will come back and get its revenge, and, you know, you're robbing our tombs and blah 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 blah. It's like we've literally done this like 5 years ago. What?
We even get another flashback which looks like it was on the same set but wasn't. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? It just looks almost identical to the original film and serves no real purpose.
And there are those prolonged... yeah, exactly. I mean, the flashback in the first film, and I know that I had some issues with, you know, some of the casting and makeup.
Yeah.
But you're right, at least it served a purpose to the story.
That's right, yeah.
What we get here is, it doesn't seem to add anything particularly to the narrative or the characters. It sort of gives us a bit of background, fine. But, like, really, the crux of it could have been done in probably more of a dynamic way. But there are also these prolonged sequences that are even repeated within the film. So the opening shot over the credits, or behind the credits, is this tracking shot through the tomb, right? So you go, the like seal drops off of the doors open, you go through, you're seeing all of the usual ancient Egyptian paraphernalia. There are statues of the cats and of gods and goddesses and hieroglyphs and sarcophagi and etc, etc, etc. And then later in the film, it just repeats that exact panning shot, except with a bit of voiceover over the top of it. And there's also a whole sequence where the character of Annette is telling us, you know, about the kind of mythos behind the tomb and the pharaohs and Ramesses and Ra and Be and all of this kind of stuff. And what you're doing is just kind of panning along these hieroglyphs.
That's right. Yeah, it's almost like she's just translating the hieroglyphs, isn't it? Which is so boring to watch on the film.
It just, you know, there have got to be more engaging ways to tell this story, and it just feels like, I tell you what it does feel like is, it feels like, I know that it's 80 minutes long, it feels like they had 60 and they've had to pad it out.
I was just going to say that. I'm just going to say they're repeating all this footage and it's still only 80 minutes long. Yeah, which does not bode well, does it? It does actually feel like there just wasn't enough story to go around.
Yeah.
It's not. I'm sorry, guys. It's just not good. It's just not good at all. It's, oh dear.
All right, I've got a positive thing.
Okay.
I've got a positive thing to say. So, the mummy itself.
Yes.
Played by Dickie Owen.
Yep.
As Ra Antef, or the mummy. Now, obviously, it's no Christopher Lee, or Christopher Lee's stunt double, whose name I can't bring off the top of my head.
I've got out of my head now as well.
Okay. But, you know, those two did such a great job of bringing the mummy to life, in air quotes, in the first film. I definitely couldn't criticise that. And so obviously Dickie Owen is in the role here. No Christopher Lee, but I do think he does an absolutely fine job. Now, as you've already said, the mummy itself isn't a particularly exciting monster.
No.
It doesn't have a lot to do. You see his eyes sort of flicking a bit behind the bandages, and otherwise he's just sort of smashing through windows and strangling people.
Yeah.
But you know, if we're looking for positives, Dickie Owen makes a perfectly serviceable mummy for my money.
He's a bit chunkier than Christopher Lee. You know, he's a bit... Well, you know, I mean that in a kind of positive way. A bit sort of...
Yeah, don't fat shame the mummy.
No,
Come
he's
on.
a bit more muscular. He's a bit bigger. He's a bit of big chap, whereas Christopher Lee was quite slender, really.
Lean, yeah, definitely.
Lean. And, you know, his mummy does look lean and like athletic almost, like he could burst into a run at any second. Whereas, you know, yeah, this mummy is a bit more of a sort of lumbering killing machine, but I think he does it really quite well. It does raise one of the strangest little affectations in Hammer films of the period. It raises the question, why did most of the monsters of this period have such a thing about French windows? Because they crash through them endlessly around this time. What is it they don't like about them? Maybe they're just saying something about, you know, so they're fad for installing them in homes. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
the architectural choices of the time.
exactly.
They're just like...
Maybe I'm doing this film a disservice and it's actually social commentary. I don't think it is, but, you know, let's not get carried away here. But, yeah, he does come crashing through doors and stuff. And he does look very good, like you say. And he's particularly good, I think, in a scene near the end where they're down in the sewers.
Yeah.
And I think he's very big and very imposing. And I think, you know, he's...
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of the few, many things are deficient in this film. This is not one of them. I think it's one of the very few highlights.
And what I like about that ending... talk about skipping forward. We're going to be here about 15 minutes at this point.
Yeah.
One thing I do like about the ending with what he does in the sewer is he kind of brings the ceiling down on himself.
Yeah.
And this is coming back to Dickie Owens being that slightly more kind of hulking, brutish physique.
Yes.
Because you really feel like he would need an entire, you know, street's worth of concrete from above him to come in
to contain him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
So the film starts in ancient Egypt, as you would expect. We are introduced to a character called Professor Eugene Dubois, played by Bernard Rebel. He is sort of staked down in the middle of the desert. An egregiously made up chieftain, Egyptian leader arrives, chops this guy's hand off. You could tell it's going to get chopped off because it looks extremely fake. And leaves him for dead. Now, Professor Eugene Dubois is the father of Annette Dubois, played by Jean Roland. And there are a couple of guys also on the expedition to essentially rob this Egyptian tomb. We've got John Bray, who is the kind of initial love interest for Annette, played by Ronald Howard, and Sir Giles, played by Jack Gwilym. And these characters form the kind of core trio who are leading this expedition.
Yeah.
Annette and John are supposed to sort of have this romantic entanglement. At one point they are, oh my God, honestly, the kind of colonial feel of this film is so gross.
Yes.
They are there, the white people are over there in this ridiculously opulent tent in the middle of the desert while they are literally ransacking the antiquities of these people. And they've got servants, let's be honest, they're probably slaves.
Yeah, almost certainly.
Serving them food and wine and water while these two are romancing each other and talking about getting each other drunk, having the worst on-screen kisses ever until later on, which I think is even worse when she kisses Adam. Then, obviously, it all kind of goes very dramatic because we get the body of the father is brought into the tent. He's been missing. She finds out he's dead, and everything goes to shit, right? So,
yes. Yeah.
But the nice thing about this moment is we get George Pastell is back.
We do, and it's always nice to see George Pastell.
Always nice to see him. And I remember when we talked about The Mummy and we were having a bit of head scratching about what exactly the character's name was that George Pastell played in The Mummy. And you said, well, he comes back later and he plays another character with like the same surname.
That's right, yes. Because as we know, because, we are British, the Egyptians only have one surname. We know this as a given fact.
Absolutely. I mean, I assume they're all related.
They're all related, and they're all called Bey. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly how it works. We all know that.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's meant to be the same character, because I think the continuity between the Mummy films is even more tenuous than the continuity between the Frankenstein and Dracula films, It's like everyone is a reboot. Everyone is just, oh, well, the last one didn't work, let's try this, until they kind of get it right with Blood from the Mummy's Tomb, but we'll come to that, which a film I actually really quite like.
I've seen it, and it's really, really good.
It is. It's a good little film. It's way better than this. But I don't think we're meant to think of him as the same character. I think it's just George Pastell playing another character called Bey, Hashmi Bey.
Yeah. Hashmi Bey.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably got a brother called eBay or something. I don't know, but it's nice to have George Pastell.
Sister called Botany.
Yes, exactly. Yes, but sister called. I like it. Botany E and Hashmi. Excellent. I will off mic. I will tell you about some of the writing pseudonyms I used to use once, where we did all sorts of gags like that, which were fantastic.
Oh,
that's a story for another time. But I mean, George Pastell, he's always good in everything. Sadly, he's kind of playing the same character.
This is what I was about to say. It's like, I don't think he's playing the same character, like not literally, but he is also playing exactly the same character.
Yeah, exactly. They're not giving him a great deal to do here. There's no challenge for him here.
No. And again, it's just kind of underlining this... Honestly, this disrespect for the people of Egypt, because they've got the same actor playing a character with the same surname who is literally the same character. He is the devoted servant of the pharaoh, sort of prostrating himself in front of the mummy and, the statues and all of that kind of thing. And he's the kind of government liaison for the expedition, who does a lot of kind of finger wagging and saying, you're this is very sacrilegious.
As well, the fact that he's a Cypriot actor, he's not even Egyptian. And we mentioned this way back. We talked about this before, haven't we? We did The Mummy and The Abominable Snowman.
Yeah.
About how difficult it was to get sort of ethnically correct, as it were, actors to play these parts.
Yeah.
And now maybe that held a bit of water, even 5 years earlier in the late 50s. By 1964, surely they could have been finding people who could be doing these roles properly. Well, there must have been.
And as egregious as, George Pastell, who's Cypriot, just sort of sticking a fake nose on him and making him Egyptian, Kevin, my jaw was on the floor. They have got Michael Ripper.
Oh, God.
As Ahmed, the virtually mute
comedy relief sidekick,
comic relief Egyptian who literally oh God
go on, be brave, you can do this.
Look, it was Surrey in the 80s, okay? There was nothing I could do about it, but we did Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat at my primary school. And what did they do? They literally got us to get our mum's tea towels, and then we put them on with sweatbands over our heads, and we put our little dressing gowns on. But we were all like 8.
Yes, and you didn't know any better.
Even though the teachers maybe should have known a little better. We certainly didn't. Kevin, it looks like that's what they've done to Michael Ripper.
Exactly.
And even beyond that, oh my God, the character is so insulting. He just grunts, essentially, or speaks in pig English. And at one point, there is this, I am absolutely 100% positive that I am not reading into this from like a 2026 snowflake woke perspective.
Yeah.
There is a cut from one scene where you have got a monkey eating some Turkish delight that literally goes to Michael Ripper sitting there mute and eating with his hands.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I know.
Fuck off.
I mean, look, you know, we can make all the allowances we want to for it being the past, but surely by 1964 we were getting better. You know, London was about to start swinging. It was a brave new decade. I know you're going to talk a little bit about 1964 in a minute, but surely against that backdrop we were getting better than that. And I don't see it happening in too many of the other Hammer films around this time.
No.
It's just, it is really bad. It's really, you know, I could, you know, sort of I could put it aside a little bit for the 50s films because it just felt that was how life was. By the mid-60s, I'm kind of hoping we were better than that, and clearly we weren't. And I think it's really bad. And
I made the point at the time that we were talking about The Mummy, like, it felt particularly icky to me that they had put Christopher Lee in brownface makeup.
Yeah.
Because he's such a recognisable actor.
Yeah.
You know he is not a person of colour, right?
Exactly.
And so it's not like they've... I know that it's never good, ever, but... if it's an extra in the background, etc., it's one thing. But to put an actor like Christopher Lee, who is such a recognisable white actor in brownface, in this very prominent role, and we spoke about at the time, like, I didn't even see that they needed to do that. He's got very striking features, and they had him in kind of the Egyptian like cosmetic makeup, right? So they had like the big black eyebrows and the kind of blue and the gold, you know, around his eyes. And I feel the same way with Michael Ripper. We have been speaking about this guy for weeks and weeks and weeks about how it's always so lovely that he turns up, and they might stick, you know, a fake pair of eyebrows on him.
Of course,
if he's, you know, being a coachman or, you know, a wig on him because he's a barman or whatever. But to cast him as a comic relief Egyptian servant is, I think, unforgivable.
When I was watching it last night, I was thinking, well, at least Michael Ripper's in it. He'll turn up eventually. And I'd completely forgotten
who he plays.
The part he was playing. And I thought, well, this will actually bump it up because it's Michael Ripper. This will bump it up a couple of points in my, you know, summing up at the end. I think you know where we're going to go with the summing up at the end, but what tier we're in. But I thought this might bump it up a little bit. And then I was just, oh, Michael, oh, I love you to bits, man, but this is not your finest hour.
No.
And he had no say in the matter.
No,
I know that. I know he had no say in the matter. He was just doing what he was told. But, you know, to do that to Michael Ripper, who was seen by so many as being this sort of this totemic figure for Hammer, because, you know, he was like, you know, he turns up, and we last saw him, I think, in Captain Clegg. Did we? Have we seen him since?
Yes.
Captain Clegg?
I think we maybe seen him once since Captain Clegg, but and obviously,
Clegg,
I mean, he made us cry in that one.
He was brilliant, and now here he is making us cringe.
Yeah, I
and
know.
I think, you know, not only are you
shame.
disrespecting the Egyptian people, you are disrespecting one of your own. You're disrespecting, you know, this totemic figure of yours, but you deserve better than that.
Yeah.
It's really uncomfortable, the whole thing. It's just, it's not good. And I just think the whole cast, to be honest, struggles. You gave me a list of cast people to talk about. I've already used all up everything I've got to say because, you know, they do what they can, but they haven't got a lot to work with. There's a writer, a researcher who's one of the great experts on Hammer films by the name of Wayne Kinsey. If you ever need a good book on Hammer films, go and get either anything by him or anything by Marcus Hearn. They're absolutely the best you can get.
Great.
And he described this as a middle-of-the-road cast. And I think that's absolutely right. This is crying out for a Peter Cushing or a Christopher Lee who would at least have brought some class to it.
Yeah.
Whereas what we've got, some working actors who are very good actors. They're fine actors, elsewhere, but they're struggling here.
Yeah.
They're really struggling. And poor, Jean Roland, Jean Roland sounds like a French vampire filmmaker. Jean Roland as Annette, she's badly dubbed as well.
Is she? I thought it was odd.
So it doesn't help at all that she's sort of... She hasn't got the chemistry with these two men. It's not her fault. It's not their fault. It's just not there on the page, I don't think. And certainly Carreras is not bringing it out of them. And then she's dubbed to boot.
Yeah.
So, a second actress comes in and be a bit bored by it all. So it's kind of... the cast, there's some good people in this cast. There's only one, really, that stands out. You've mentioned him, Fred Clarke. He's the only one that's worth talking about, I think.
I mean, he is really good as that completely obnoxious.
Yes.
Like, he is basically playing, I think, what... If English people ever say the word Americans, and they go, Americans. This is what English people are referring to, is this very stereotypical version of a very sort of brash, loud,
very brassy,
money obsessed, kind of. Just kind of bull in a china shop kind of character, right?
Yeah.
And I have to say, Fred Clarke does an amazing job at getting that across. He's so good.
I have a bit of a theory about the character. In my review, and no one's pulled me up on it, so I'm assuming I got away with it, I think he's very funny. I love the fact that he's wisecracking about Turkish delight and belly dancers and learning to dance to ragtime and stuff like that.
He's obnoxious, but it's like
he's a lot of fun.
Well written as an obnoxious character, and he performs it really well.
He does. But I wonder, back in the summer of 1962, and we haven't covered the film yet because it got delayed, its release in Britain, so we're going to get round to it. So thankfully we've got a bit of respite before we reach Hammer's version of The Old Dark House, which is another film that's not very good. And that was directed by, of all people, William Castle.
Was it?
Yes, that William Castle of House on Haunted Hill and the Tingler fame. There's a story to this. We'll talk about that when we get to the film as well. But, he was sort of notoriously a bit of a huckster, bit of a salesman, bit of a sideshow guy, And I wonder if Carreras, although he'd left the company at that point, I wonder if he sort of popped back in because they'd got this American director around, saw him on the set and based this character, this Alexander King, on William Castle. It's only a theory and I've very little to back it up, to be honest, but... it's a thought.
Yeah, I like that. And the character does specifically, he's making reference to, P.T. Barnum and kind of,
That's right, yeah.
So if there is that kind of... sort of sideshow,
that's it,
businessman, huckster kind of thing going on. That would make sense.
Which William Castle never made any bones about. He always, of course I am. That's what I'm doing. I'm selling these movies.
Exactly.
I'm getting bums on seats. That's what I do. And he does it, even with his worst films, he got people bums on seats. And he was very entertaining as a human being.
We showed The Tingler, didn't we?
We did. That was
it was
riot,
so fun.
That was great. Getting the audience to scream for us, which was fantastic. If you've seen the film, you know why we did it, and if you were there, hopefully you had as much fun as we did. But it was a terrific night. And I make no apologies for talking about our night with the Tingler, because it's still more interesting than Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. But I do wonder, maybe this was meant to be, or at least inspired by.
It's a fun theory.
But yeah, it's a theory. I've got nothing to back it up. There's nothing written down to say it, but I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to go with it. But the rest of the cast are just kind of there, aren't they? Just doing what they're doing.
Is Fred Clarke an American actor? Is this one of these examples where they sort of thought they'd get an American name on the cast?
Yeah, I don't think he was as big a name as some of the Americans they got on the cast. But, I mean, he was in a lot of American films. He was Californian born, but he'd been in Sunset Boulevard.
Ooh.
It'd been A Place in the Sun, The Court Martial of Billy Mitchell, Visit to a Small Planet. These were big hit films. Did a lot of television as well. So, yeah, he was reasonably well known. He's got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, after all, but that was for his work on television, which he did a lot more of. But, he wasn't the... I know we sort of mocked, sort of poor old Quatermass back in the day, but, he was a proper actor. He'd got a career behind him. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure Fred Clarke was as big a star.
Sort of bringing that cachet.
Yeah, he didn't really do that, but I think it really was them saying, if we're going to have a sort of huckster carnival sideshow guy, he's got to be American, hasn't he? Because we Brits are so reserved, we wouldn't dream of doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell you, the character also that he did remind me of was the American in The Abominable Snowman.
Yeah.
Because, of course, he has that idea, doesn't he, of taking one of these things back.
That's right.
And, sort of touring it round.
Yeah. And, you mentioned King Kong, which is where that comes in, isn't it? That he's very much like the arsehole in that, sort of.
Yeah.
It was Beauty killed the Beast. No, it wasn't. It was you. That sort of awful, horrible man. And I think Fred Clarke is less horrible than that. But he's just he's the kind of guy that you'd probably bump into in a pub one night and wish you'd stayed at home. You know what I mean?
What an incredible description.
Yeah, he's just a bit in your face. He's a bit too much, He's just, too much. But, yeah, I don't know. I like the character as long as he's on the other side of that screen.
Yeah,
I like the character.
Sense, yeah.
I like the character because he's the only one in the film that's got any spirit to him.
I mean, honestly, that it does feel that way. I mean, I guess the other character who at least has a bit of interest to him, and we haven't really spoken about him yet, is the character of Adam Bouchon, played by Terence Morgan. And he is, I think, obviously immediately up to something, although Annette and John don't necessarily see it. So they meet Adam on the ship back from Egypt as they are transporting all of the crates of the stuff back to, I guess, I don't know where actually, the UK?
It is UK, yeah, it's London, yeah, of course.
Of course it is, because Adam says, this made me laugh. I was like, oh my God, you guys are really rich. Because John says, oh, well, when we get back to England, I've got us a lovely little... I've got us a lovely little apartment or a lovely little hotel in Bloomsbury for Annette and I. And Adams says, oh God, you can't be doing that. You must come and stay with me in my huge house on the edge of Regent's Park. And I'm thinking, I would be over the moon with a lovely little hotel in Bloomsbury. Thanks very much.
In fairness to them, Bloomsbury has got some very nice posh places in it. I live in Bloomsbury. I've dragged down the entire area by quite some considerable way when I moved in here. It's not all, nice posh places. So I can probably imagine that, or where the hotels are is kind of quite nice, around Russell Square and stuff. But yeah, by the time you get to where I live, it's a lovely estate. I love where I live, but I live here. So yeah.
That's so funny. You're like the opposite of gentrification, Kev. You just...
Oh, property values have plummeted wherever I've gone. They really have. I'm just a curse.
That's hilarious. But so he's like, right, come and stay with me. But he's got designs on more than just, bit of, making new friends. Because firstly, he's got designs on Annette and snatching her away from under John's nose, which she doesn't put up a huge amount of fight about.
No, she doesn't, to be fair.
He doesn't exactly beat about the bush. She's been in the house about 5 minutes and he gives her a Fabergé jewel.
Oh, yeah. He's been around a long while, we need to point out, about Adam. So he's, to him, time probably doesn't mean very much, to be honest. So...
That actually is really interesting because when I was watching it, I was like, who has, a collection of Fabergé bits and bobs in just a case in their living room? Come off it, mate. But of course, what we find out is that Adam is actually the undead, can't die ancient Prince B of Egypt.
Yep.
Brother of Ra, who is the mummy.
That's right, yep.
And what we get when Annette is taking us through the riveting story of the hieroglyphs is that King Ramesses had these two sons, Ra and B, and they were very different. And Ra was the good one and B was the bad one.
Yep.
And Ra dies and is mummified, and Ramesses basically curses his other son and means that he is then like cursed with immortality, right? So he just has to live through the centuries.
It's a variation, isn't it, on the myth of the wandering Jew. That European folktale of a Jew who supposedly mocked Christ while he was on the cross and was then cursed to roam the earth until the second coming.
Interesting. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, and it's one of the very few things that's actually interesting about this film. I wish they'd developed that a little bit more.
Because we only find out about 10 minutes before the end.
That's right, yeah.
And until then, he's just sort of another nefarious dude, sort of obviously up to no good, but you don't really know why.
He's a bit slimy, but we don't know what he's up to, what he's doing, or why he's doing it. If we'd been told earlier that he was immortal, it might have been more interesting, perhaps.
Yeah, and essentially, the motivation at the centre of the film is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Because it's not that he's after power, it's not that he's after jewels or even really revenge. What he's after is breaking his father's curse.
That's right, yes.
So part of the curse is that the only kind of being, only entity, I guess, that could end his suffering and kill him is his brother. And so he essentially has to reanimate the mummy so that the mummy will kill him and kind of eventually, finally put him out of this kind of...
Yeah,
give him a bit of a rest. Exactly. Which, again, like... do that for the whole film.
This is what's so infuriating about the film. There are some good ideas in it, but they're just so badly handled.
Yeah.
They're just, an interesting... You've got a character who's, 3,000 years old, I think he says at one point. You still make a boring film about him.
Yeah.
You've got to kind of almost work double plus hard to do that. Just by accident, you should be able to make a good film about a 3,000-year-old man. But somehow, poor old Michael Carreras, he just doesn't seem to be able to do it. It's so infuriating.
It really took all our effort to fuck this one up.
Exactly, yeah. And again, it just buys into this notion, which I'm absolutely convinced isn't true, but the more I say it, the more I convince myself that he was trying to make a bad horror film to show Hammer that they shouldn't make horror films, which, it's just like, it would be a ludicrous thing to do. It's obviously not true, but there is that bit of you that thinks, what else? Why else was you doing this? Why else was you frittering away these good ideas on a film as dull as this?
Yeah,
really strange.
Just to draw a line under my ranting about the, I think justified ranting about the casting in this film and the sort of browning up of white actors, is you then have this ancient Egyptian prince played by Terence Morgan, a white actor.
Yeah.
If you were going to cast anybody as Adam Bouchon out of this cast who you have got to play with, cast George Pastel.
Yes, exactly.
Because at least he is, again, coming back to my point, I know it doesn't make it right, but at least he is from roughly the right part of the world and the right kind of, it's just, but no, they completely gloss over the fact that this guy has been able to hide in plain sight because Prince B from ancient Egypt is a white guy, Terence Morgan. Like,
it's absurd. It is absurd. I mean, narratively, I can excuse it because it throws suspicion off Adam, but that's no excuse for anything. It's so absurd. It really is. There had to be a better way to do this. There really had to be a better way to do this.
I'm so cross, Kev.
Well, this is a new experience. A Hammer film has made you cry. A Hammer film has made you laugh. Now it's made you cross.
Made me cross.
Wait till we get to 1970. You are going to see fury from me like you've never seen before. Trust me. Trust me. I'm going to be apoplectic with rage by the time we get to 1970.
Can't wait. You mentioned earlier that we were going to take a look at 1964 because this Curse of the Mummy's Tomb is the last film from 1964. We move on to 65 next week. So before we leave the year, we have a little feature where we look back at what was going on in the world at the time that the film was released. So here is Hammer in History.
Hammer in History.
As you know, I usually concentrate on the UK because Hammer are a British company.
Of course.
And I'll come on to talk about some very exciting films. It was a good year, 1964, but let's start.
It was, yes.
Let's place ourselves politically, as we often do. This year, 1964, was a big one in British politics. We had a general election and the Labour Party defeated the Conservatives, ending a spell of 13 years of Conservative government.
Yeah.
So Harold Wilson became Prime Minister.
It's worth remembering, actually. I like to remind people of this. People complain, Labour, they're always destroying the economy and all the rest of it. They've hardly ever been in power. It's so infrequently they were ever in power. By the time we got to Tony Blair, we got 3 consecutive terms. That I don't think had ever been done before. So, it's like, blame them all you like, but most of the time they weren't in power. Anyway, off my soapbox. I've got my bloody soapbox out again, haven't I? Oh, God, I'll put it away. I'll give it a polish and put it back in the corner. There you go.
But immediately some interesting stuff started happening. So the House of Commons voted to abolish the death penalty for murder in Britain.
Right.
In 1964. The last execution took place in August of that year when Peter Anthony Allen and Gwyn Owen Evans were hanged for the murder of John Allen West, which were the last 2 executions for murder in Britain.
Right.
We've got some women doing some impressive stuff.
I don't believe that for 1 minute. I mean, how dare you? This is 1964, damn it. We're British.
Now you're really getting, crazy.
Now I'm energised. What women doing interesting things in 1964 Britain? How dare they?
I know, there's a couple of them as well. Dorothy Crowfoot Hodgkin won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, the first British woman to win a Nobel, for her determinations by X-ray techniques of the structures of important biochemical substances.
Yes.
Go,
I've heard
Dorothy.
Of her. Yeah.
And Helen Brooke set up the first Brooke Advisory Centre, offering teenage contraception and sexual health advice. So building on, the introduction of the contraceptive pill a couple of years ago, we've now got, actual decent health advice, contraception and sexual health. But I really love that it was specifically targeted at teenagers because obviously, as we've discussed a couple of times, teenagers were a new thing, and
they were a new thing, and boy were they randy as hell.
Well, exactly.
So they needed some guidance. Yes, definitely.
We had a bunch of firsts. Terence Conran opened the first Habitat store on London's Fulham Road. Very 60s.
Very, none more 60s really. Yeah.
I bet you weren't getting plate glass windows in Habitat because it was far too classy for that, and I can imagine our mummy having a lovely browse.
Bloody windows, what do we need those for? Doors shouldn't have windows in them.
The first purpose-built Gurdwara in Britain opened. This is a specific place of worship for Sikhs. Yes. And so the Guru Gobind Singh Ji Gurdwara in Bradford first opened its doors and to worshippers, and it was the first one that Britain ever had.
You see, we are making progress, which makes Hammer's behaviour look a little bit more suspect.
Elsewhere. And also the official opening of the UK's first undercover shopping centre, the Bull Ring, opened in Birmingham.
I used to go to the Bull Ring every Saturday.
Yeah, I thought you might.
I used to go every Saturday and spend the whole time moaning at my mum. Go see my nan who ran a stall. And I was always pleased to see Nan, but after about 5 minutes, I'm starting on Mum, we got to go back. It's on soon. Mum, it's on soon. Shut up. I'm trying to get back and not miss Doctor Who. And so my whole sort of memory of the Bull Ring is me being very anxious that I was going to miss Doctor Who. We never did. Mum
really
always got us home in time.
That's really cute.
I'm not obsessed, honestly. I'm not.
And elsewhere, violent disturbances between the mods and the rockers were going on at places like Clacton Beach and Brighton. And I just thought that was worth mentioning in relation to The Damned, which we covered a few weeks ago when we were talking about the mods and the rockers. So this was kind of the height of those clashes.
And at some point around there, there's a young couple going at it in an alleyway, one of who looks a little bit like Leslie Ash, I seem to remember. But yeah, what a terrific film that is.
Oh, I love Quadrophenia. So, on TV. Oh my God, what a year. Okay, now, some 90% of British households owned a television in 1964, which was compared to around 25% in 1953 and 65% in 1959. So you've got 90% of households in Britain now having a TV in their home.
Huge uptake, wasn't it? Yeah.
And to fill the programming for all of those people tuning in, BBC Two launched in this year.
Yes.
And apparently, I didn't know this, on the opening night of BBC Two, which was the UK's third channel, the opening night was disrupted by power cuts in London, and all that could be screened was the announcer delivering apologies from Alexandra Palace, which is so sad.
Yeah, it is. And isn't there a story about some animal that was going to be on the show that night? I thought it was a kangaroo, but I can't see that listed. But there was some animal that was going to be taking part in the thing that night who peed in an elevator, being taken, was so frightened it peed in an elevator and shorted out the elevator, trapping people inside. So not only did they have the power cut going on in the wider world, they then shorted out the I'm sure that's a story I've read somewhere. If it's not,
no way.
If it's not, please correct me, but I'm sure I read that story somewhere. Yeah,
an excellent moral: leave kangaroos where they belong, in the Australian bush.
Do not put wild animals in elevators. I think that's the takeaway from this one.
That's an excellent moral. Yeah. However, the following day, BBC Two began its scheduled broadcasting, and its first programme was the children's series Play School, which would run until 1988 and was a formative show for me as a little one.
For me as well, because obviously I was 2 years old in 64, so we would have been watching, or I would have been watching that. So the generations grew up on that programme.
And was it, did they have the rag dolls and Big Ted and Little Ted and Humpty Dumpty and all that kind of thing when you were a kid as well, or was that brought in later?
I've got a feeling they came later. The problem is it was so on for so long and was so pervasive in British culture.
It all sort of melds together.
I can't imagine a time where they didn't have Hamble and Big Ted and Little Ted and all the rest of it. But I don't think they did. I think in the early days they didn't. I think they came in a bit later. Yeah.
That was definitely my memory of that show. I loved Play School.
To be fair, even at the age of 2, I was much more interested in Jerry Anderson blowing things up and the Doctor flying around the universe. So, Play School, that's for kids. I'm 2 now.
Yeah, exactly. Come on. Where are the Daleks?
Yeah, absolutely.
Elsewhere on TV in 1964, 2 long-running shows, one of which is still going today. Top of the Pops and Match of the Day first aired on the BBC.
Yeah.
Okay, Beatles Watch, because obviously we're in 64, so the Beatles are still going strong.
Well, I was thinking when you started this, we just rewrite scripts for every time we do this now up till 1970 and just go, and this year in British culture, the Beatles. Also, and then just move on, because, the Beatles dominate everything.
Still doing their stuff. So on the 24th of December of 1964, the Beatles gained the Christmas #1 for the second year running with I Feel Fine, banger.
Yeah.
Which tops the singles charts for the third year running. They have now had 6 #1 singles in the United Kingdom alone already.
They were good, weren't they? They were bloody good.
And the Beatles' first film, A Hard Day's Night, was released as well.
A great film.
I've never seen any of the Beatles films.
Have you not?
No.
I would highly recommend A Hard Day's Night and Help.
Okay.
Definitely give them a go. Magical Mystery Tour is a bit more of a challenge. Mm-hmm. And Yellow Submarine is what it is. You'll either like it or you won't. But the first two, I really, really like them.
Okay, fun. Right, we will transition from Hard Day's Night into the rest of 1964 in film and wrap this up. Best Picture winner that year was My Fair Lady. I would like to apologise now to Mike because he is a Oscar nerd and knows all of the best pictures off by heart, and I like to text him when I'm putting my Hammer in Horrors together, and I was like, 1964 go. And he said My Fair Lady, and I was like, oh no, it's Tom Jones. And he was like, oh yeah, Tom Jones. It's not, Mike, it's My Fair Lady. I don't know what I was reading, but you were right first time is what I should just let you know.
Poor old Mike.
Well, I don't know about that, Becky. Producer Mike here just interrupting slightly because 1964, the Best Picture winner was Tom Jones. That was a 1963 movie which won the award in 1964. My Fair Lady was a 1964 movie and it won Best Picture, but it actually won the Best Picture in 1965 because, of course, the Oscars happen in the early months of the following year, celebrating the movies from the year previously. So you can say Tom Jones or The Sound of Music. Either answer is correct technically, but the movie that actually won the Oscar in 1964 was Tom Jones, but it was a 1963 film, right? Simple. I mean, I don't know why there's so much confusion about it, to be honest. As you were.
Elsewhere, oh my God, what a year. So, Zulu.
Which starred Dickie Owen, or featured Dickie Owen, I seem to recall.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
In bandages, or?
No. Well, maybe at the end of it, by the time the attack was all over.
Yeah, maybe.
But, I think they were all in bandages by the end of it.
Dr. Strangelove.
Yes, brilliant.
2 James Bonds from Russia with Love and Goldfinger.
Yeah.
Alfred Hitchcock's Marnie. Yeah. 2 Carry On films, Carry On Spying and Carry On Cleo.
Brilliant. AKA
2 of the best ones they ever made.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Fistful of Dollars for the Western fans.
Magnificent.
Magnificent. All right, hold on to your butts, horror fans, because in 1964 we got Lady in a Cage, Mario Bava's Blood and Black Lace.
Brilliant.
Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte.
Fantastic.
Kwai-Dan, Oni Baba, Roger Corman's The Mask of the Red Death and The Tomb of Ligeia, Herschel Gordon Lewis's 2000 Maniacs, and a film that I have never seen nor heard of, but I'm assuming you will have, and I just need to say it because it's got one of the best film titles I've ever heard in my life, The Incredibly Strange Creatures Who Stopped Living and Became Mixed Up Zombies.
I've seen it. The best thing about it is the title.
Oh, it's always the way. It's always the way.
In fact, I was all through that. I was thinking, well, this is good. We're not talking about The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. Now you've mentioned that, I'm thinking, oh, good, let's go back to The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb.
Oh, really?
So,
really? That bad?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that bad. And worse.
Okay, fine. Well, let's go back to The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb then.
Let's do that. Yes, we should. I apologise. We've sort of meandered all over the place, but this really is one of those films that's so difficult to get any kind of enthusiasm for.
I know.
It's not even like it's absolutely terrible, like, Incredibly Strange Creatures, which can be enjoyable. It's just bland and boring and flavourless and almost instantly forgettable.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with it, it's not what I expect from Hammer at this point in their career.
I just think it's a shame because before I said, this idea that actually there are some interesting concepts, right? That there was stuff that they could have done, but it just, none of the stuff that would have been interesting to make it much more different from The Mummy are really developed. And so all of that stuff then suddenly feels very crowbarred in at the end. And you think, if they'd spent more time with maybe touring the mummy around before it disappeared, or it was sort of on a rampage, killing audience members and stuff. But obviously that isn't the mummy's sort of want, is it? Because it's only killing people who have desecrated the tomb specifically, and blah 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 blah.
But they could have rationalised it by they've desecrated the tomb by coming to the exhibition and touching their exhibits and so on. They could have thought that through.
Exactly. There are ways that they could have really kind of played with these slightly more interesting ideas. But what they do is they seem to have lent back very much on the tried and tested mummy formula. Play it beat by beat, but less interesting. And then all of the interesting ideas they did have, they sort of whiz through in the last act, don't really interrogate. And you think, it's a shame, like there was potential here, but just unrealised.
And it's so curious, isn't it, that I said earlier that, when he takes over the company, Carreras is going to experiment. And we're going to start getting films like, Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde. And we're going to get Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter. We'll get Demons of the Mind. Not all of these films are going to work. But he's trying to do something new with established material. And yet here he is, just recycling a film that was only, 5 years old. It's just, I hope he just saw the light at some point and thought, well, we can't keep doing that at Hammer. When I take over, we're going to have to do something a bit more daring than I did earlier.
So we did talk sort of earlier about the ending, and the mummy takes Annette. Of course, because, what else are you going to use her for, basically?
Of course.
He sort of picks her up and carries her down to the sewers while the men take chase. And Adam / ancient Egyptian Prince B follows them down. And the mummy does kill him, and then brings as I said earlier, the sort of ceiling of the sewer, and I guess everything that's kind of above it up to the street, sort of down on itself, which is a pretty cool moment.
It is. And
poor Annette is just left sort of sobbing, and then you just get the credits roll.
That's right.
But I wanted to ask Kev, do you think that Adam sort of gets what he wants at the end? Is this what the whole movie has been essentially building up to? That Prince B / Adam Beaumont is killed by the mummy and sort of, given that peace finally.
I think it is what he wanted all along. I think he does kind of get it, but he goes about it in such a horrible way. Just, sort of affecting so many other lives along the way, doing it, that I don't feel, at the end, I don't know whether I'm meant to feel, well, he got what he wanted, isn't that nice? I did, he got what he wanted, the arsehole. He didn't deserve that, he's horrible. He was a nasty piece of work.
Definitely didn't engender any sympathy. But again, if they had done the reveal earlier and maybe explored a bit more about actually how horrendous it must be to
how
still be living under this curse.
That would have been a really good story.
And he could have been, one of these classic sympathetic monsters that we keep coming back and talking about. But actually, you're right. It just is a bit of a damp squib. Even when he's dead and you think, right, well, he's gotten what he wants, you just think, all right, well okay, so
that's
that then, I guess.
I didn't care enough about him to be excited about it, and, she's still stuck down in the stinky old sewers on her own. So he's like, well, I could have done with a bit of better ending. It just kind of peters out almost. Like the rest of the film, it's got no energy to it. It just sort of stops. Just, that's it. It's just like, we've run out of money, we've run out of film, we've run out of time, we've done 80 minutes, what more do they want? Let's just stop here. And that's not what I come to know and love about Hammer films.
No,
it really isn't.
far from it.
No.
But we will, as always, end on sort of favourite moments, and there are a few. For me, I mean, Jesus, you'll hear them and you'll think. I mean, compared to some of my favourite moments from other films, they're pretty. They're pretty.
Well, one of mine is actually a really bad thing, but it made me laugh. So I've actually got to put it in simply because I've got to find something.
Mine are pretty low impact, but there is a very cool shot. I love it when a character in any film you get it quite a lot in Sherlock Holmes. Where. He's using a magnifying glass to look at the kind of amulet medallion with all the carvings on it. And at first, the camera goes through the magnifying glass to see the amulet, and then it kind of comes around the other way, so his eye's just really big.
That's right. Yeah, that's kind of a recurring trope, isn't it? I mean, so much so that Peter Cushing did it in, I think, The Skull. And then when he has his cameo appearance in Top Secret, the comedy film. Have you seen that?
No, I don't think so. Maybe when I was very young.
There's a wonderful scene. Sorry, a bit of a spoiler if you haven't seen it, but there's a wonderful scene where he's playing, I think he's meant to be Swedish. And the way they've done the language is they basically filmed the film backwards. And they're running it backwards. He's going, and this is supposed to be Swedish. And when we first see him, he's looking through a magnifying glass with the big distorted eye. Mm-hmm. And then he stands up and takes away the magnifying glass, and he's still got the big distorted eye. Which is really funny because if you know enough about these kind of films, you'll have seen it happen so many times, and particularly I believe it's The Skull where that happens. And it's a great moment. It's so funny.
That's amazing. But yeah, just I think it is such a trope that I was just like, lovely, great to see it here.
Yeah,
always a pleasure, never a chore. There's also a really odd little sequence when they come round to, is it Hashmi Bey's sort of lodging houses?
Yeah.
And there's like a family who own the lodging house. Yeah. And it's a mum and a dad, and they're kind of bickering. Yeah. And then a kid at the table having his tea. And he's got bread and strawberry jam, and it's these huge hunks of white bread with dollops of strawberry jam on it. And it like unlocked a memory for me, Kev.
Oh, right.
Because I used to get bread and jam as like my Sunday night treat. That was like, they'd sort of give me a decent lunch. You'd have like a roast or something for lunch.
Yeah.
It's not like I was being, neglected.
No, sure. No.
But then in the evening, I would, and it was always like, lovely proper white bread that you used to get in the old days.
Yes.
That you have to cut.
The stuff you cut it yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Huge.
You make a doorstep out of it.
Fucking hunks of this stuff. And dollops of jam. And I'd completely forgotten that was a thing from my childhood until I saw this cute little pudding having his pudding at the table, and they keep going to him like he won't eat it. They keep sort of saying over their shoulder as they're bickering about stuff, money and things like that, would you eat your bread and jam? You never had to tell me twice, I'll tell you that. I loved it.
I was going to say, if you were there on the set, you'd have snaffled that before they started action, wouldn't you? So, to be honest, I think I might have done as well. Diabetes, to hell with it. I think I might actually have done it.
I mean, to be honest, I know that I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I know that doesn't get caused by anything. I know it just happens. Sure. But if it did get caused by anything, it was probably my bread and jam addiction when I was a child.
Probably, yeah. Well, as addictions go, it's fairly mild, isn't it, really? But
it's fine. It's fine, as vices go. And the only other moment, which I thought came so out of left field, but actually gave me the one feeling of like warm and fuzzy throughout this entire film, is when King, the obnoxious American, is approached by a sex worker.
Yep.
And she comes up to me, all right, darling, do you fancy, as they do. And he goes, oh, no, not tonight. But he still gives her some money and tells her to get a good night's sleep.
That's
and I was
right,
like,
yeah.
how extremely out of character.
Yeah.
But the one moment in the entire film that I was like,
oh, I know. Isn't it bizarre that the most obnoxious character in it is actually the most...
Yeah, I know, 100%.
Isn't that weird? Isn't that just so odd? Yeah.
Go on, tell me about your one that's so bad it's good.
Well, I'll give a quick call out first for the scenes in the sewer.
Okay, yeah, go on.
At the end. I think it's the only time we're in danger of actually becoming atmospheric. I think they actually do work. I kind of like those shots of the mummy in the background, sort of slightly out of focus, sort of looming over her in the sewer. They're really good. If the rest of the film had been half that good, we'd have been onto something. But there is an extraordinary exchange between Adam and Annette about women's intelligence.
Oh my God!
Quote, what a home means to a woman. It's hilarious, and I shouldn't laugh at it because it's not being funny, it's being serious, but it is so prehistoric, it's an absolute riot. He's trying ever so hard to be sort of saying, oh yes, you're an intelligent woman, and then she's undermining it all, saying, oh yes, but I'd like my own home and all the rest of it. It's like, for God's sake, it's like, we've talked just now about history and all the things that were changing, so the Brooks centres and stuff like that. Things were changing for women, but not in Hammer World.
Oh my God. And I know, obviously, it's like set in, the early 1900s or whatever.
Yeah.
Honestly, you said that and I had to put my mic on mute because I had a coughing fit. I had forgotten about this and I think I was so offended by it that I had immediately just pushed it down and turned it into tumours, forget it even happened. It is so bad. And you're right, he's sort of saying it must be so exciting kind of, being an assistant out on the, out on these expeditions and stuff. And she's like, oh yes, but really what I want is my own home. And I only really did it to get to know my father better and blah, 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 blah. It's for fuck's sake, woman.
Compare and contrast with Carla, another assistant to a scientist in the Gorgon.
Thank you.
Compare and contrast, and you've got two very different takes on women. And I think John Gilling and Terence Fisher got it right. Much more right than Michael Carreras did in this,
Yeah, and, those films are set in very much similar kind of
That's right,
periods.
Yeah.
You could have just... Again, this is slightly coming back to what you were saying before, Kev, about you almost have to try hard to make a film this bad. Yeah. It's you didn't have to include that. What?
No.
It's so
It doesn't advance the plot at all, does it? It's just because it doesn't advance the plot, because it's so ridiculously, outrageously dated, I just find it hilariously funny. It's just for God, I can imagine audiences laughing at that in 1964. Because it's just so prehistoric. It just doesn't make any sense at all. It's
maybe ridiculous. It was supposed to be funny. I don't know. But it's not. I didn't take it as being played for laughs.
I didn't take it as funny. No, I'm laughing at it, not with it. And I think therein is one of the big problems with this film. If this is all I can come up with as highlights of the film, where in other films I've had to leave highlights out because I've got too many of them. Mm-hmm. That probably tells you everything you need to know about Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, I'm afraid.
What a shame.
What a shame. I know. We had to get one eventually.
I know.
We had Maniac where we stumbled a little bit, but we were always going to get a bad one that neither of us liked.
Yeah. Evil of Frankenstein even, but I tell you what, this is a next...
Evil of Frankenstein is a masterpiece compared to this. Yeah.
At least it's got Peter Cushing in it.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Now, we talked last week, Kev, about this being on the double bill with the Gorgon.
Yeah. So it did okay. People saw it, unfortunately. So, if people were coming away from that double bill, I very much doubt they were talking about this one.
Or they were talking about it, but not necessarily.
Yeah. And, like I said last week, I hope people at that double bill, because they used to do rolling double bills back in the day. You could go in any time you liked. I think I've mentioned this before, that my dad took me to see Planet of the Apes, and we arrived about 10 minutes from the end of the first screening. So I saw the big shock reveal before I saw the rest of the film.
Oh, no!
It's astonishing that that's one of my favourite films of all time, isn't it, really? But anyway, but back then you could just go in when you wanted. And I kind of dread the thought that there were audiences that went in and saw Curse of the Mummy's Tomb first.
Yeah.
You know, did they stay for the second film? You know, it was the B feature, so essentially it probably should have gone on first. But no, I hope they saw the Gorgon first and then, you know, walked out during Curse of the Mummy's Tomb or something. But we're so hard on it, aren't we? But thoroughly deserving, I think.
I think so.
Having said that, I bet you when this one goes out, we'll put it on social media and there will be people defending it. Because every Hammer film has its fan.
That's fine.
Every single one. And that's brilliant. I love that. I love the fact that there are fans of these films that I don't like. I think it's fantastic. I wish I could see what they see in it. That's all, you know. So have at it, but I'm not going to change my mind. So,
Okay, well, we're going to have to do it. Is this going to be our first lower ranking, Kev? Where are you putting it?
It's a big moment in Hammer Time history. Yes, it is. Oh, I'm sorry, dear. I'm reluctant to use the lower tier because I know just how low we're going to stoop in coming years. But this one, it sort of plods around wearily. It never gets boring enough to want you to hate it, but never gets going either. There's no fire in it, no passion in it. And I'm going to say it's very much lower. I was being lenient with it when I did my review of it. And when I was watching it last night, I prejudged it and put lower middle because I thought it's not that bad, is it? And then I watched it again. I thought, no, it is really, isn't it? It's such a shame.
I think... I'm definitely putting it lower as well.
Yeah.
And I think what really tips it over for me is fine. It's boring.
Yeah.
Fine. It's plodding. Fine. It's repeating what we've done before and isn't really saying anything new about, you know, the mummy mythology, etc., etc. But it's things like those Michael Ripper moments.
Yeah.
Some of the other casting choices that are so egregious in, you know, and as we say, like, we're in 1964 now. We may have excused it in the 50s. I think by this point it's becoming more and more difficult to do that.
It is.
That really just tip it over the edge. I think if it had just been a bit boring, I would have put it lower middle.
Sure.
But those and the gender politics as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's got these other things about it that actually make me annoyed. So
for me, it's just a bit more than a bit boring. It's one of the few Hammer films I struggle to get through. Yeah. And that's what kills it for me. I cannot put up with a boring film. Life's too short. I watch enough boring films at the rest of the time. I don't want a boring Hammer film.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not what I want. So, so sorry, it's our first lower. Sorry, fans. I know you love it, but it's not for me.
No, and it can't be for everyone.
Absolutely right. We are going back into it. In fact, Hammer are going to give the Gothics a bit of a break again. We're going to have 3 psychological thrillers coming up. Bit hit and miss, but when we get to the third one, I can promise you we're back in elite level again.
Lovely.
It's your favourite.
It's
your favourite, I think.
Oh my God, which one?
The Nanny.
Oh my God, I love The Nanny so much.
There you go. So we've got that coming up, I think, in 3 weeks' time. So, you know, we are heading back in the right direction again. The thing is with Hammer, we're going back in the right direction. We're going to have 1 year where it's bloody awful, and then we go back in the right direction again. So, you know, there's more ups to come than downs.
Exactly. Stick with us, listeners.
Stick with us.
Enthusiastic Becky will be back in a couple of weeks. Thanks for listening to Hammer Time. We'll be back next week with another psychological thriller, and I've just spotted that Donald Sutherland's in it. 1965's Fanatic. If you're watching along with the podcast, you can rent or buy it in a couple of places, including Apple TV. To check out the full list of movies we'll be covering throughout the podcast, head to evolutionofhorror.com/hammer. We'd love to hear from you, and as I mentioned, I think last week, we've got a mailbag episode pretty imminent, and you can send us any questions or comments to hammer@evolutionofhorror.com. You can follow the Evolution of Horror Network on Instagram @EOH_network. You can follow me on Instagram and Blue Sky @BunnyDarke. And on Letterboxd, I'm Becky Darke. And Kev, where can people find you?
You can find me as EOFFTV on Blue Sky, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Letterboxd, probably a few other places that I don't use anymore. You can see my website, the Encyclopedia of Fantastic Film and Television. It's EOFFTV.com. Search for EOFFTV Review, where you'll find the review site. And I promise you, next week, we'll be a bit more energised and possibly a bit more upbeat. I feel bad that we haven't been as energetic.
I know, I feel bad.
But there you go.
Too.
It's the subject. It's the subject. Stick with us. It won't happen very often.
Don't forget to rate and review us on your podcast app of choice. Maybe not for this episode. Thanks for listening. Join us next week for another episode of Hammer Time.